Hello, everyone. Good morning. Happy Monday and happy Martin Luther King Jr. Day. We're so excited to be here and to spend our morning with all of you. I try and do a lot of reflections on days like today, as I have since I was a kid. And I was thinking, I don't know that there's anything else that I would rather be doing than talking equity and talking race and inclusion with some amazing local leaders and celebrating the life and legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. So thank you all so much for being here. I'm excited to be with some local leaders of our region, but before we really jump into who we have on the panel, I just want to take a minute to introduce myself. So my name is Tori Pelletier, and I'm the Special Projects Coordinator and Racial Equity Project Manager at GPCOG. And for those who don't know GPCOG, we are the Greater Portland Council of Governments. And to provide some context, we are a regional planning organization that serves 25 cities and towns in Cumberland County on a wide variety of different initiatives. And over the summer, we've really jumped right into expanding our racial equity work. We held a series of webinars on race and equity in local government. We talked about racial and ethnic disparities in COVID-19, and we're in the midst of doing some internal training for staff, and we had the pleasure of meeting with several of our local leaders and elected officials in the hopes of working together to make Maine as equitable and as inclusive as possible. And some of the local leaders that I had the pleasure of speaking with over the summer are joining me on this panel today to talk about the work that their municipalities are doing to advance racial equity in the cities and the towns that they serve. So I'm really excited to hear from all of them. And before I do the full introduction of who we have on panel, I want to take a minute to thank Maine Initiatives, the NAACP of Maine, the MLK Holiday Observance Steering Committee for asking us to host a panel, and of course the sponsors. We were extremely flattered to be asked to hold a panel. So I do want to just thank everyone for all of the work in organizing this, because none of it would be possible without everyone's help. And I want to give a huge thank you to everyone that's here, all 134 of you and counting. So thanks all for being here. And to let you know, this meeting is also going to be recorded. So we will make sure that a copy of this webinar is posted on the Maine Initiatives website and the GPCOG website once it's available. So again, just a huge thank you for being here. And without further ado, I do want to tell you who we have on panel today so that I can get off screen and give it up to the experts. So from South Portland, we have South Portland City Councilor Decca Delac, and we have Margaret Brownlee, who is MECA's first Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer, both who have been essential to the creation of the South Portland Human Rights Commission. Then we have Lilia DeAndrade, Maine Community Foundation's Vice President of Community Impact. And we also have Portland City Councilor Pius Ali, who are co-chairs of the Portland Racial Equity Steering Committee. And then we have Falmouth Town Manager Nathan Poore, and we also have Dustin Ward, who is a pastor and a racial equity and reconciliation advocate, who will talk about the series of trainings on Black history and systemic racism that are being put on for some of the frontline workers of Falmouth. So, like I said, absolutely amazing panel, and I'm really excited that everybody is here. In terms of procedure, because I already see a hand up, and I know that there's going to be a ton of questions, we do ask that if you have any questions for the panelists, and right when I said that, the hand went down. So if you have any questions for panelists, please utilize the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We will do our best to get quick questions answered. I'll be checking the Q&A. Shout out to Carly, my colleague behind the scenes. She will also be checking the Q&A. And we'll do our best to get your questions answered. But what we're going to do at the end is we'll come together with all of the panelists for an open Q&A session. So at that point, you'll get to ask what you like, and we'll make sure that we take some time, 10 or 15 minutes for that towards the end. This webinar will go until 11:30 a.m., so keep the questions and keep the comments coming as things continue. And I think I've covered pretty much everything. And so we can just jump right into our first panelists. So let me go ahead and just reintroduce the two of them, Decca DeLocke and Margaret Brownlee from South Portland, who are creators of the South Portland Human Rights Commission. So I will go ahead and let them take it away, and I will disappear off screen along with a couple others, and I'll let them go ahead and take it from here.
Okay, thank you so much, Victoria, for that great introduction. Can everybody hear me? Awesome. So my name is Decca DeLocke. I am the city councilor for the beautiful city of South Portland. And when we are talking about inclusion and equity and diversity, as a Black woman, it does not occur to you to run for office, period, right? And in women in general, to be honest in that fact. And for somebody like me who has so many different layers of ethnicity, it was even not reachable for me. So I'm a Black woman, I'm a woman first, then I'm a Black woman, and then I am an immigrant who has an accent, right? And then also on top of that, I'm a Muslim. So it never occurred to me to run for office, period, at all. I thought there was no space for me to do that. But I did work behind the scenes, you know, to make sure that people are registered to vote, to make sure people are really voting and, you know, reaching those rights that they have. But as I go, folks that I know kept asking me, why don't you run for office? Why don't you run for office? And I always kind of brush it off and say that is not for me. That's not for me. So as we get close to 2016, I said, why not me? Why not me? And then my amazing brother, Pius Ali, who really paved the way for most immigrants in this state, was on top of that for me every single day, asking me, why are you not running for office? So I took the training of Emerge Maine, and I really run for office. But the reason I ran that office was to make sure that there is a voice for BIPOC communities in the city of South Portland, because we did not have that before. And I did not get to there by myself. I had a large community of white, Black, and Indigenous people who were behind me and really supporting me to, you know, run for office. So when we talk about diversity and inclusion and equity, my first resolution that I bring in front of the city council when I get elected was Cities for Citizenship. So Cities for Citizenship is a major national initiative that aimed at to increase the citizenship among eligible US permanent residents and encourage cities to make sure that they telling their community members that if you are eligible to become a US citizen, please do so, and we can give you those resources that you need. And this Cities for Citizenship is set by Mayor Baldasio of New York, Mayor Lori Lightfoot of Chicago, and Mayor Eric Garcetti of City of Los Angeles. And what do you know? Our city of South Portland is part of that. So right now there are currently 8.8 million legal permanent residents in the in the United States who are eligible to become a US citizen. 52% of those folks are low-income people. So when you are a low-income person and an immigrant family of 8, how can you pay for $700+ for each person to become a US citizen, right? So we need to get those resources these folks need and make sure that we help them out so that they can become a US citizen and contribute to our economy. Once we have immigrants coming to becoming a US citizen, the income and the economy of that state really increases up to 11%, according to this Cities for Citizenship data that we have. Another thing that I introduced to the city of South Portland was Indigenous Day, right? To celebrate the Indigenous folks of, celebrate for their, celebrate and honor Native Americans people and commemorate their histories, their culture, their stories. So I also introduced that. Another resolution that I introduced to the city of South Portland was World Refugee Day. I mean, how many city councilors that you know will do that unless you have a voice in that seat. I mean, I am really have a great city councilors in the city of South Portland, who we always call ourselves as the community organizers. And when I bring certain resolutions and certain initiatives that I have, they always support and really stand behind it. And they even challenge more and say, can we do more of this? How can we make this even better, right? I have the idea, but they make it even bigger and better. Another thing that I did for the city of South Portland, I did give the key to the city for two amazing Black folks who are really working very hard to change the narrative of Black people. One of them was Dr. Mustafa Santiago Ali. He is a big social justice for environment. He kind of correlates, how environmental justice kind of affects more on BIPOC communities and vulnerable communities than other communities of their peers. He worked for the EPA for 24 years, just talking about the social justice of environmental. And in 2017, when Trump administration started cutting environmental things left and right, he quit that job and said that I can do something better by myself. Another person that we gave to the city, the key to the city, is Alisa Garza. Who does not know Alisa Garza, right? She is the founder of Black Lives Matter and a powerhouse when it comes to promoting the well-being of Black people, not only in the United States, but globally, right? And when George Floyd was murdered this past summer, my community of South Portland, especially BIPOC communities, we become so numb. And me and Margaret, my sister, and other BIPOC communities, we came together and said, what can we do? What can we do in order for us to have a better place to live in this society? And I really choked up and become so emotional when I think back that day, because it was so painful, not only for myself, but also for my children. Anybody can sit on a person's neck. That could have been my son, right? That could have been our daughters. That could have been any of us. And we come together, brainstorm, and say, what can we do? And we created the Human Rights Commission. So I'm gonna give this part to my sister, Margaret, to talk about that.
Thank you, Decca, so much. I really appreciate that and all of the context. I'm learning from you every day. A story that people don't know about me is that I also am an emerged sister. I'm a woman of color. I'm part of the LGBT community. My wife and I have been married for over 10 years and have a young daughter. And I share the same story that you have, is I didn't think that politics were for me. I really didn't. I never thought about it. I never saw myself in a position of leadership. I never thought that I could run for office. I didn't have the skills. And so thankfully, graduating from Emerge, I learned all of the skills on how to run. Unfortunately, I lost my race, city council in South Portland, but that was the impetus for the work that I'm doing right now with the South Portland Human Rights Commission. I was able to really turn the lemons into lemonade and work towards justice in our community, and received so much support from Councillor Delac, as well as Councillor Pius Ali, and so many others that really lifted me up and said, you can do this. You're smart, you're talented, you can make this work. And so we brainstormed, we drafted letter after letter to the mayor, to the city manager. I was able to reach out and use my network, not just my Emerge network, but the various colleges that I've worked at, from USM to SMCC and currently Mecca, to really create this commission. And it's not just me. I never want to take the credit for that. I may have written some documents, but really the motivation and inspiration behind it was the community, and together we created it. So the information is on the City of South Portland website. There are currently 13 members on the commission throughout the city. And we have members of the city represented, such as the Human Resource Department, to the school board, to the police, to the planning board. And really, it's a community-wide effort. We used best practices from other cities. I looked at roughly 6 or 8 cities across the country that were doing similar work during the rise and insurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement that were really taking off. You know, it was just, in my opinion, it was a perfect time, perfect place. You know, we were it was the perfect moment to do this. And so grateful that we were able to make it happen. I don't want to take up too much more time, but you know, we are working on some current projects in the city that, you know, I'm working on with Councillor Dulac, and we're making sure that we're taking a comprehensive approach, that we're being mindful, that we're not just reacting, but we're being proactive to the things that we're working on. And information can be found on the website. So I hope that's a good enough amount of time. I want to give some time to our other presenters. Yeah, so thank you for having me on this panel.
Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, Decca, both so much. I know everyone are very appreciative of everything that you're doing in South Portland and everything that your colleagues are doing in South Portland. So thank you both so much for sharing that. And also just to highlight the interesting and great part of this is that South Portland, Portland, and Falmouth are all member municipalities of GPCOG. So it's really nice to be able to just hear from local leaders that are also part of the regional planning family. So just a huge thank you to both of you again. And moving right along, we'll go one city over to Portland, and we will hear from Pius Ali and Lilia DeAndrade, who co-chair Portland's new Racial Equity Steering Committee. So we'll go ahead and wait for both of them to appear up on the screen. Let's see if we can ask them to start their video. And hopefully they appear soon and they can take it away from here. And I see both of them, so I will go ahead and ask that Pius and Lilia go ahead and take it away.
Pius, do you want to go first and tell us, since you are the founder of so many of us being here?
Lydia, I defer to you. Why don't you go first and I will follow suit.
Oh, thank you, sir. So when I wanted to just start by saying that I have never been interested in participating in the politics, the front side of the politics of City Hall or local politics. I am really interested in politics. I started working in on campaigns when I was like 14 years old. I campaigned for 6 candidates in the state that I grew up in. I'm a news junkie, but I have always felt like the processes in the city are a little intimidating and off-putting for me. I'm not a Portland native. I don't scour the Portland Press Herald every single day. And it seems like when I have watched the meetings, it just seemed like there were always people in the audience who are experts, who know everything about everything that's going on. And I say this, even though I've been longtime friends and acquaintances with many of the people on the city council over the years, but it just seemed like a really intimidating and scary thing to do. And raising kids and having a crazy job, it just didn't seem like I had the time to put into it either. But when I heard about this opportunity, and like Margaret and Decca, I heard about this from the Racial Equity Steering Committee from Pius, I thought that it was a chance for me to step in. I had felt really helpless during the Black Lives Matter protests this summer. I have asthma, I'm older. It was not a situation where I could take the risk given COVID. And I was feeling like I needed to do something, but I didn't know what I could do. And so when this opportunity came up, it seemed like as John Lewis said, if not now, when? And I remember my favorite documentary about Dr. King is a film called At the River I Stand, and it's about the last days of the campaign and the garbage strike in Memphis. And there was this fabulous scene of all these women making sandwiches for the strikers. And I thought, you just have to contribute where you can. And for me, I studied race. My degree is in sociology. I've studied racial disparities forever. I worked as a civil rights educator a civil rights educator all over Maine and all over the country before I started at the Community Foundation. And then a big chunk of my work at the Community Foundation has been focused on dealing with race and racial equity. I was hired to start the People of Color Fund, which is now called the BIPOC Fund, at the Community Foundation, which was the first racial equity fund in the state. And so I knew I had the professional background. And then I also thought, like, I'm a daughter of an African immigrant. I'm a woman of privilege. You know, I can take the time to do this work, and I should be able to speak knowledgeably about this stuff. But I have to say that the work on this committee is really scary and intimidating. The Racial Equity Committee, Steering Committee, could be a once in a lifetime opportunity for the city of Maine, for the city of Portland. It could be something that never happens again, and we have to take a critical step towards addressing it. I felt like I had a responsibility because, as difficult as the relationships are in Portland, I didn't want us to become another Minneapolis or Baltimore or Louisville. I wanted to do whatever I could to step in. And so, Pius, I'll turn it over to you now. And you can talk maybe a little bit about the origins of the steering committee, and I can jump in if you need me.
Thank you very much, Dr. DeAndre. My name is Pius Ali. I am a city councilor here in Portland. And before I go on, Lilia, you are right. Being in where we are, being in public office is intimidating. And coming to city council meetings, for those of us who are on this side and the public who come to engage us, it is intimidating for both of us. So thank you for saying yes when I reach out to you. And I will do something that I always do, especially today being a special day that we are commemorating a great man who have lived a great life and use his life to make a change, not only here in America, but globally. I will say that I am grateful for people like Dr. Martin Luther King and many people across this country. And here in Maine, someone like Jerry Talbot, who sacrificed a lot of their time, their lives, their careers, and their future and the future of their future generations of their kids and their grandkids, so that people like me will come to this country and do what I am doing. I'm also grateful. I have seen a couple of my colleagues and some of our colleagues. When you are speaking, Dr. DeAndre, I was busy looking to see who is here. And I've seen that some of our colleagues on the committee are here. Thank you very much for joining us. We should have sent an email to you and let you know. Me and Lilia talk about that. And then we forgot, so we apologize. I've seen the mayor here. Mayor, thank you for joining us. I've seen Councilor Zaro and Councilor Fournier. Please, thank you for joining us. And if there's anyone that I haven't seen you, I left there a while ago. Thank you for joining us. And I've also seen former mayor and former city councilor, Jill Dustin. Councilor, thank you. I know that you're not a councilor anymore. You're always going to be my councilor. You paved the way for a lot of us. Having said that, we all know that Dr. King and many others did set up, did a lot of work to lay down the foundation of where, as a country, what and where, what we need to do, and how Long story short, the work that Dr. King did have set out a lot of blueprint for many generations to come. And there are many ways that as a country and as a community, we can interact with race and many other inequalities or injustice, environmental, gender. You go on and on and on. But now, what we are confronting as a country, we also what happened last summer, and we also what happened last week. And I'm hoping that the work that we'll be doing here in Portland, and the work that is being done in South Portland, and the work that is being done in Falmouth, and the work that is being done here at the state of Maine will not only reset the work or reset the direction that we're going as a people, as a country, but also our work should set as an example for other cities and communities who are not doing this work. Last summer, after the so many protests that was waving from every part of the country, it's landed in Portland, and the city of Portland decided to do something. Under the leadership of the mayor, we had several conversations. We talked, we pushed each other, jolted each other a little bit, and then we came to some sort of conclusion that the mayor will, in consultation with the council, should appoint a racial equity steering committee. And the mayor did her due diligence. Thank you, Mayor Snyder, for the work that you put into this, and appointed people from the community. I think first, many of us councillors talked to her and brought proposals, and then she incorporated the proposals that we brought into the one that she had. And then we created the resolve, which it's a long, how do we call it, legislative language, but basically what that resolve asks us to do as a committee is one, to examine the expanding role of the police, review the way the city will interact with other agencies that provide work, not just for BIPOCs or Black people, but other people who are marginalized. And also so that we can make recommendations for those policies. What I normally say when I talk to people about myself or individually is that we want to update the way we work. You know, if you have a computer or you have like a XX something part 1, you go to part 2, things get updated. We need to look at our policies and see which ones need to be changed. And so far, so good. We have had good days. We have had days where we challenge each other and talk over each other. But at the end of the day, we almost always listen. And I am lucky and privileged to be co-chairing this alongside Lilia DeAndre, who brought a lot of, she may not be sitting at this side, but she's sitting on the other side with a lot of knowledge, a lot of lived experience as someone who was born and raised in this country. She brought that to the table. So was almost everybody on that committee. Each and every one of us have a unique experience and knowledge and a unique way that we have had interaction with the larger system. So I hope that the work that we'll bring forward will help guide myself and my colleagues on the council to lay out a future that will create a city that is welcoming and that everybody who live here, irrespective of the color of their skin, their gender, where they are coming from, will feel that they belong not to just the city of Portland, but to the state of Maine. So thank you for having us today, co-chair. If I have missed something out, please feel free to add.
Well, the one thing, you did a fabulous job, Pius. Thank you so much. The one thing I was thinking of is that part of this panel is to talk about a call to action. And the call to action I would give to people is to do what you're hearing everybody on this panel doing. Look for where you have your abilities and jump in. And even if it means making sandwiches for people who are out there protesting, but the one thing that I think is important for us in terms of the Racial Equity Steering Committee is there are really amazing people who have a really broad reach in this community, and you should feel free to contact them, or more importantly, we would love to have people attend our public comment meetings, because we want to hear what you think the big challenges are in this community. If you can't get out and do work and volunteer, share with us, and there's an opportunity for you to share written comment if you don't want to come to the meeting. But tell us what you think needs to happen in Portland around the around our issues with BIPOC people and racial disparities, most importantly. Share with us what you think needs to happen or what you think the concerns are. That's one really easy, important way that you can contribute and follow in this legacy of social change that Dr. King has given us. How's that, Pius? Is that okay?
That's great. You mentioned our, how do we call it, when we have like public hearing.
Public
What I
comment.
want to add is that part of the resolution that we pass under the leadership of Mayor Snyder is that we will have public conversations that will be convened by the Portland Public Library with the city. And we would love to talk to people. Whether you live in Portland, you work in Portland, you play in Portland, please pay close attention when the time comes. Join us and let's see how we can shape and create a city that is welcoming and for everybody who live here. So thank you.
We want.
Yeah, that we deserve.
Better. Thank you.
Thank you both so much. Thank you, Pius. Thank you, Lilia, for your presentation and for all of that information, just for all of the work that you're doing. I know I'm a Portland resident. I live and work in Portland, so I'm really excited to follow along with all of that amazing and hard work. So thank you both so much for sharing. And last but not least, we will go north and we will hear from Falmouth, from town manager Nathan Poor, and from Dustin Ward, who has been doing some amazing trainings for some of the frontline workers in Falmouth. So we'll go ahead and see if we can get both of them up here on screen. And I'm going to ask both of them to start the video and see if they appear. There's Dustin, hello. And we'll see if we can get Nathan up here as well. Hello, Nathan. Hello, Dustin. I'll let you both take it away.
Morning, Tori. Thank you to you and GPCOG and Main Initiatives and NAACP for putting this panel together. It was just a couple of weeks ago when you reached out to us, and I couldn't be happier to be part of this today. But I've got to throw a little bit of honesty out there too, and that is I don't know. I couldn't imagine myself being in this position a year ago, quite frankly. I'm 55 years old, born and raised in Maine, and quite frankly, didn't know where any of this was my problem, other than being supportive almost from the outside looking in. Never really worked in a community where there were a lot of outward issues or concerns that a town manager should be concerned about. And I'm embarrassed to say that it took so much to get me to finally listen that you have to be a community leader, whether it's a lot of issues in your community or just a few. So, you might say my awakening sort of started last June while watching protests and reading articles and watching videos while I was watching the protests on Facebook Live. And, I decided it was time to enhance my understanding, of what was happening. And, it's just a repeat story, and it's just mind boggling for me now with this, now that I'm really listening. I always thought I was listening, but now I'm really listening. And I discovered that, I hadn't been listening to the Black voice enough. I'd only been listening to my own inner voice. And, sure, I've had ton of exposure to professional development that teaches the importance of racial justice. For years, I've been attending, the service focus or orientation at our church on this day, rather than taking the day off. It's been a day on. But again, I knew I wasn't listening enough after, just having more of this work. By the way, I don't want to make this about me, but I do think it's important to hear from someone like me what it takes sometimes to figure things out, even at the age that I'm at. So I want to thank you, Dustin, and everyone else and all the Black voices who aren't giving up. And again, I'm sorry it took me so long to really, really listen to you. So in Falmouth, like last summer, like so many other communities, Falmouth started to have public discussions about racial injustice. You know, we first held a forum to discuss police department policies and statistics. And, you know, after much consideration on the next steps and after consultation with town council leadership, we decided that we certainly had some work to do, even in Falmouth. Policy reviews would most certainly be part of our work, but we also knew that we needed to really, really understand and listen to Black voices. A genuine policy review, in our mind, requires a genuine understanding of the issues. And this isn't to say that we're not evaluating policies now. An example would be our HR director and assistant manager is working with other communities to learn how to enhance diversity in recruiting for employment opportunities within all of our departments. We don't have diversity in our employment right now. And so we're working on that. It didn't take me long to learn that we needed a lot of help. And fortunately, I met a Black voice that was willing to help us guide us in our next steps. Dustin Ward, who's I'm going to turn it over to here really quickly. He cold called me. He's starting up, you know, his new efforts, and he cold called me the day after the forum on police policy and statistics. And you know, over the next month, we kept talking with each other over the phone, Zoom. We got to know each other really well. And then that led us to develop a bond of trust, I think. And it was Dustin's tolerance of where I was in this journey that made me trust him so much. He made it easy for me to ask him questions and have those conversations. And for that, you know, I owe Dustin gratitude like no other mentor on any subject I've had in my personal and professional experience. By the way, that's the first time he's hearing that compliment from me at that level. It's also embarrassing and sad that Dustin, a Black man with a Black voice, like other Black voices, have to work so hard to get others to listen. And I understand, by the way, that is a privilege of mine to learn about racism rather than experience it. I've seen that. I've seen that, you know, that saying on in protest. I've seen it in articles, and it certainly resonates with me. And I appreciate that, and I accept that. It's my privilege. I'll most likely come under potentially some criticism for not immediately calling to action more changes right away in policy practices within our own organization. I can't offer a defense of this criticism, and I continue to offer up my apologies while we catch up. I will say that I've been speaking with other organizations and introducing them to Dustin. So, you know, like Lilia, you know, mentioned earlier, you know, that's not part of my daily, you know, job description as a town manager, but, you know, it's what I can do outside my organization personally, and I'm trying what little that can have for an impact. So Dustin and I, we developed a new training curriculum for key staff within our organization, mostly frontline workers, as Tori mentioned, but also those employees that are involved with policy development. They're not the policy decision makers, but they work with policy makers, and I thought it was important for them. And Dustin agreed that we needed to get them a better understanding of not only what's happening today, but for a long time. And so Dustin, you know, he's going to speak more about that shortly. You know, we've discussed that we may have an opportunity to develop a model, perhaps, for other communities that may need assistance. Thus, that's the ongoing coordination with Tori and others at GPCOG. The town council leadership in Falmouth has also indicated an interest in this training curriculum and how it could be used for community-wide learning and awareness conversations, perhaps through our library, and further calls to action. The town council will also incorporate equity and inclusion discussions through its community-wide visioning exercise and citizen engagement that will inform and guide and update the town's comprehensive plan. So I could go on, and I guess we got a little extra time, so we can go on a little bit more. And I know Dustin can talk, so I'm going to hand it over to him. Thanks, Dustin.
Yeah, it's dangerous that everybody gave me this amount of time to talk. Previous pastor and also a social justice person. But let me first say that one, Brother Nathan, I'm humbled and honored to be working with you. I'm honored and be humbled to be on this stage with such great names and voices. And I'm humbled because I'm just a young Aroostook County boy. I grew up in Presque Isle, graduated Presque Isle High School, but experienced kind of racism throughout my whole life. And the reality of growing up in Aroostook County, as much as I loved it, as much as I loved the work ethic I learned, it was isolated. And it created a sense of identity that I did not have the pleasure of understanding until I got out of there. And that's when I came to Southern Maine. And my hope, actually, unlike some of the other folks who have talked today, I wanted to be in politics. Man, I wanted to be a lawyer and a senator, and I wanted to be the first Black president. And Brother Barack Obama got to it first, but there was a desire in me to be in kind of the work of policymaking and politics. But then I took a detour, and God called me into ministry. And that kind of gave me that other area in which a lot of people like to talk about, and you see a lot of arguments, is religion. And so one of the things that I've now brought together was politics, religion, and this idea that I was going to be a pastor. And so as I entered into that space, I witnessed, as we all did, and what you're hearing today, the reality of last summer. And for many folks who have spoke today, you're hearing, and I hope you hear, my brothers and sisters are saying they felt inadequate. Initially, they felt inadequate that they couldn't get into politics and make change and do all these pieces. And let me tell you, if you haven't realized yet, we are valued and we are important and we have power in our voice. And so I too felt inadequate. But when I saw the events of this summer, I said, no more. There can't be someone just sitting on the sidelines. And so I felt like I had to jump in and move my vision forward. And that's where we stepped in and we created the business. It Is Time LLC. And one of the focuses that I had was I wanted to begin to help spread this reality of the Black voice, right? To advocate for Black and brown brothers and sisters, but also to work with towns, communities, and our white members here in Maine to help end racism. Because I had experienced it for so long, and I know others have as well, that I wanted a way to be able to finally see an end to racism. I did not want to have to witness what I witnessed last summer any longer. And so one of the things that I focus on with my brand new business, as others had started creating businesses to do the same thing, was I felt that other cities needed help. One of the things that I know, and as I've heard today, Portland is in good hands. South Portland is in good hands. And the work that's being done there is excellent. But I felt like there are other towns and cities that may not have the opportunity to have Black and brown individuals come in and assist with some of these issues. So that's why I actually touched base and started right in Falmouth. And it was ironic, as Nathan and I have kind of conjoined stories together and we learned about what really got us together. I was actually reading the Forecaster. And in it, I saw an article about Falmouth wanting to engage in equity work. As I'm reading the article, I see a response about how this new vision forward would bring this a great idea. It was wonderful. And one specific person had wrote in there that this would mean, maybe we could get cheaper and more affordable housing to improve our diversity. And I read that and I was a bit shocked, but then I realized an opportunity. That thinking seemed to be a little bit rooted in some discrimination, right? Some ideas that maybe haven't been explained. And so one of the things that I want to do is I want to reach out to Falmouth and say, listen, that's great that you want to do this work. But let me explain to you why maybe that's not the only option. That shouldn't be your first response to improving the lives of Black and brown individuals with this work. So I contacted Nathan. I contacted the town, really, and I got in touch with Nathan. And so, like he said, right place, right time. And he was hoping and looking for someone as well. So I was excited that he would take a chance on a brand new business, on a brand new person, and on a young kid from Aroostook County who's trying to figure out how to take action. So like he said, we kind of got to know each other, and we had an hour-long conversation, really just learn each other. And that's one of the beautiful things about especially Dr. King's legacy is there was trust within not just the Black community, but white communities as well. And he built that trust. And that's what Nathan and I started to do. And we started to discuss, okay, what is his staff? What is his clients? What does his people need? And the goal was we wanted to provide education in a collaborative way. And as you see on the screen, we wanted to help understand Black history to better understand the conversations that were going on today that were surrounding the issues that Nathan was talking about, that he was witnessing, things that, like he said, he hadn't been really privy to, but is starting to learn. And for him, he wanted others to have that same education. So we sat down and we kind of mapped out a curriculum. We said, okay, folks need to understand Black history. If you're ever going to understand how to move forward, you got to understand where you've been. So for us, we built a kind of a Black history education format. We wanted to look at systemic racism. We wanted to look at biases. And we wanted to understand and help answer that question. Why are there anger and issues and pain and hurt that is stemming from what we're seeing last summer and what's been going on our whole lives? So we began to target individuals who would take that curriculum and understand it. And so finally, there was edits, there was multiple sessions of edits. We stopped and wanted 2 sessions and grew to 6 and everything in between. And finally, we landed on the curriculum that you see at the bottom. And it's 3 sessions that are about 2 hours long. We start from way back 1490. We explain how slavery even started and how we got to the point that we were at, that we're talking about today, which is the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement. How does that all fit together? But then we couldn't just stop there. We can't just glorify the civil rights and then skip all the other years that have gone on. So we wanted to do an extra part. What has racism looked like thereafter, all the way up until today? And we've already conducted those 2 sessions. And so what we have on the horizon is the other piece. What Nathan was talking about is, okay, let's talk about criminal justice, Black Lives Matter, the policing. What are those pieces that some of his folks are just not understanding or need to understand better in order to move this forward? And so we set dates, we plan to kick off. And like I said, we're underway and we're already 2 sessions in. And in the next coming weeks, we're going to do that final 3rd session. And I wanted to just explain to any other towns and individuals who are in places of policy and decision making, what made this successful, what I feel is successful. And I think Nathan would echo that. As of right now, it feels like it's working, like we're doing something. First key to success for me and from what I've noticed, and you hear it in Nathan's voice, there was an acknowledgement of a lack and a need. There's such humility from this brother here that he recognizes that something needs to be done. And I think a lot of towns just need to be humble enough to recognize, okay, we need to step into this space. But Nathan's also someone that's great to work with because he's not looking to dominate the space. He wants to come alongside, and he's brought, this voice, this one voice to be able to do that. And I appreciate that. And I know John Lewis's quote is kind of our backdrop, right? If not us, who? And part of that, I think the us is also our white brothers and sisters who are saying, okay, I want to do something. And we are willing to bring them in if they're looking to do those 2 things, stay humble and not dominate this space. And so for me, this was a match made in heaven. But the other key piece for me is something that Nathan and I continue to talk about. We're not trying to convert people to a political side. That's not what we're in this for. Racism is a humanitarian issue. It is not a political issue. And we go into that thinking that, knowing that. This is not about politics for us. And then for us, we also want to bring depth and breadth of knowledge. So we've used data, we've used videos, we've also used, teaching. How do we coalesce all those things to provide a really straightforward and honest conversation about the issues going on? And then we spent, with the 2 months of planning, that was our trust building. We began to understand one another so that if we find that there are things that maybe are coming off wrong, we can talk to each other about it. And we don't take it as a slight to one another. But that all happened before we even entered into the first training session. And there's been open availability to discuss matters. We're honest with one another. And for us too, we haven't really spanned this out for very long. This has just started right before the holidays, the Christmas holidays. So we didn't want to lose momentum even with that break. So we've been kind of chugging along back to back sessions. So for us, that's a huge piece of what's made this work and what's made this successful. And like Nathan said, we hope that becomes a model. We want to create something that we can impart to other individuals, other organizations, and say, okay, it worked here. How can we tweak it to work for you and your business or your organization? And so as you saw on that previous screen as well, for the business, we have taken a very easy approach, and there's 3 steps. You learn, you think, and you act. And right now, what Nathan and his crew are doing, they're learning and they're thinking, right? They're learning really about Black history. They're understanding what is going on. And my hope is that by learning and understanding the origins, you can then turn around and be able to empathize, internalize, begin to understand why Black and brown individuals are feeling the way they're feeling, why we're going through what we're going through, and how racism has really been embedded in our very institution and leaves us with all the work that you're hearing about even today. So for me, that's kind of an easy 3-step process, and we keep honing that in. And that for me is, where the business came. It is time. It is time to do something. It's time to end racism. It's time to be proactive about it. And then our hope is that because it's time, it'll be time for people to take action, right? To speak up and speak out. And that's what I encourage Nathan and others to do, is that once you've learned, once you've thought and you've internalized, now you can speak out. Now you can speak up. Now your decisions and policy making can be focused enough to know how do you improve the lives of Black and brown individuals. And folks, that was Dr. King's legacy. He was looking to improve the lives of brothers and sisters across the nation. And so we're hoping that we can just do a small piece of that in Falmouth. How do our actions and how do our policies and procedures begin to uplift the Black and brown community, even for Falmouth? And I'm hoping that that is what we're beginning to impart, so that when we're done these sessions, that review of policy will have a new meaning and will take on kind of a new focus. And it won't be steeped in old kind of embedded ideologies, but will move in a new direction. So I've been excited about it, and I've been blessed to be able to be called in to do this work. So Nathan, if there's anything I missed, please, jump in, let me know.
Yeah, I think the directions we have from Tori is you and I have to eat up another 13 to 14 minutes here before Q&A starts. So
it's okay, we can do it.
All right, let's we didn't practice this, but let's go for it. So Dustin, the further call to action, the real call to action is going to be when you start looking at your policies and your practices. And once you have that, a really good firm foundation, that genuine understanding we've been talking about. What are some of the things that you think we might find in policies that, what could we predict areas of policy in a community like Falmouth that, that's something we should take a look at? I throw that out at you. I know you're a political science major at USM, so this is probably right up your alley.
Absolutely. Oh yeah. And shout outs to USM really molding me to be ready for opportunities like this. I think what Falmouth might see moving forward, and what other towns might see if they were to begin this work. First, you're going to look at your own diversity within your own boards, your own councils, even your own departments. Who are the decision makers, and where's that Black and brown voice coming from? I think many times you're going to step back and say, okay, maybe our hiring policies, maybe the ways in which that we are looking at our applicants needs to change. How do we get multiple voices and not just one? And I always preach and teach, tokenism is a reality, right? It's very easy to bring in just one Black or brown individual and say, there, we fix diversity. And that's not what the Black community is asking for. How do you represent multiple spans of voices within your decision-making areas and policies in many departments? So I think you'll step back and see that. Second thing I think you'll probably look at is housing. That was what led me to Falmouth in the first place. Is okay, and we've seen this in our second session. How are our housing policies? How we're going to build a better environment for people coming to Falmouth going to look? It starts from the very welcoming aspect. How are we welcoming in businesses and people of color into our town? That you shouldn't just be a town that people, breeze on through and go somewhere else like to Portland, but that they can feel welcomed in your own town. And that also means, can they feel like they can stay and not just afford, but how do we build the economic value of Black and brown individuals so that they can be in a place like Falmouth? We know that there's discrepancies within median income here in the state of Maine. So how do we uplift economic value, economic wages, so that people don't have to just go into cheap, affordable housing, but can afford housing in different areas throughout Maine? And then, finally, as we think about that second piece in time with that, how do you build businesses, Black and brown owned businesses in Falmouth? I think that is vital and huge. And for me, especially our business, one of the things that I want to keep preaching and teaching, what I want to work on in the next 5 years, how do we improve getting Black and brown businesses into some of these towns? I want to go into Falmouth. Now I want to see people of color in my grocery stores, coffee shops. I want to see them making decisions. I want to see, a very diverse population, so that again, when people come, they feel welcome. They feel they can be part of of that town. And I think to mitigate this idea that only these issues are in Portland, right? That only diversity, only Black folks are in Portland. That's not true. We're spread out throughout. And we saw in our first session, there's at least someone of color who identifies as Black or brown in every county in Maine. Like I said, I came from a rustic county. There's not a lot, but we're there and we're representative there. So I think just off the top, those would be some of the initial things that you'll probably see as you go into your reviews of your policies. And then you'll start seeing, you'll uncover other things as well, as we've kind of learned about the history of Black and brown individuals.
You know, one of the things that, we've been talking about recently, and I know there was a question that said, someone's raised the question, what has the engagement been like in Falmouth lately? It started out in the summer, it was really focused to police. It's citizen engagement, quite frankly, has quieted down quite a bit. That hasn't stopped us from doing what we're doing. And I know the town council is waiting on a couple of things. The phase of the work that you and I are doing, and maybe creating some models for the community-wide discussion, but also for them then to start with the policy review, and then through our comprehensive plan and visioning, I think the community engagement is going to get a little bit more robust again. But one of the areas we talked about is recruiting, and it's not a secret, at least for people in the municipal sector, that it's becoming so hard to find qualified candidates for police officer positions, fire, EMS, finance, the town clerk's office. And I recently talked with our fire chief, and he said that he got asked the question by a resident, how can we find diversity there? And he said that Southern Maine Community College is doing some work on that. I didn't know that, so I think it's going to take people like me and you and others to say, wait a minute, there's just this huge opportunity here to fix a problem, multiple problems, and to enhance a lot of lives and provide, more diversity and skill sets in our municipal governments. Right now, it is tough, like I said, to find qualified people to work for towns and cities.
Mm-hmm. No, I completely hear you on that. And you got two things kind of working for you and against you. What's working against you is the way in which Maine has always been very, very spread out, but very limited in the pool of individuals that you can find. And most having kind of entered into Portland, they begin to kind of embrace Portland, South Portland. That's where the larger pool is. So when you stretch out from that, they might be in positions already, police officers and what have you. So you're dealing with a state population that's very limited. So one of the things that I think you have now working for you, which we've seen the data show, COVID-19 has now pushed people out of cities from around the nation, and they're coming to Maine. They want to buy homes in Maine. And so I think what we need to do, the work that we're doing, is impress upon the Black and brown communities throughout the nation to say, Maine is a great place to come, build a business, live and work. And that will create and shift that limited supply, that limited focus that we have, and create a more diverse field. I would love to see our population double, because we have so much space, so that you have what you're talking about, an ability to go out and say, okay, I have individuals that I can pull in and be part, so I can create a diverse atmosphere. And I'm actually seeing it, and I have my family's still up in Aroostook County. I'm actually seeing it there, where what they're saying is because of COVID-19, it's called in more doctors and nurses. Those doctors and nurses are coming in, and they're more diverse than they've ever been. So now what you're seeing is families are moving up there to do the work that COVID-19 has really called them to. So again, COVID-19 has really impacted the Black and brown community negatively. But there is this silver line that says, okay, it's shifting the demographics of this state. Now, how do we jump on that as we move out of a COVID-19 era, and we help improve the state of Maine and say, okay, we want to welcome Black and brown individuals in so they can be part of the pool you're talking about? How do we reach out and pull them in to specific places? I think it's tough because a lot of people like to have people who are born and bred from Maine, right? That's been the mantra. And I think now we need to start, kind of opening our eyes and saying, how do we bring people here to live and work, and say, hey, Maine is open for business, and we want your business. We want you to be here. But I hear you. It's hard to find qualified individuals in a pool, in a state that has a very limited population and a very undiverse population. Absolutely.
So I guess we'll keep talking until Tori jumps in. So I do have one more question, and that is, so based on your work so far in Falmouth, tell me one challenge that you've discovered that you were a little bit surprised at, maybe, or that you think will be a challenge we've got to overcome working in Falmouth and other communities, and then what area of hope have you seen that you didn't quite expect?
The two major challenges. One is this virtual aspect. It's actually making it feel like I'm not connecting sometimes. We do 2 sessions, right? Sometimes in the first session, I feel that, but I only am able to feel that because of the questions I receive. And that's because we're having a virtual format. In some of the other sessions, in a virtual format, I don't get any questions. So then I feel like, am I really connecting? If I could see individuals face to face, I think it would build more of a trust and more of a connection. So to me, that's going to be a major challenge moving forward. The hope that I have is that at some point, this kind of concept that I've created, this learn, think, and act, and the reality that you've kind of already stated is that at your point of reviewing, that's going to be an opportunity for me to step in and kind of help guide that conversation. So I'm hopeful that by learning some of these aspects, that now you'll have a greater understanding of how do you bring it to its fruition, and that maybe I can help guide that conversation and kind of see positive and something qualitative, right? You can look back 10 years from now and say, hey, remember when we started this? That's a product of that. And you can kind of all that. So I do have a hope for the future moving forward. But man, if I'll be glad when the virtual is done and I can build better connections with individuals. That's really been the biggest challenge.
Thanks, Dustin.
Thank you. Yeah.
Oh, thank you both so much. I had a moment again where I forgot I was hosting the panel and I was just glued to everything that you both were saying. So thank you so much for taking some additional time and talking a little bit about the work that Falmouth is doing.
Hey, Tori, I can't turn on my camera. I think you locked me out.
Oh, let me give you camera access. Hopefully that.
Power.
Ooh, I was like,
I
what is
just
going
worked
on
some
here?
magic there behind the scenes. Thank you, Decca. And really thanks to everybody. And thank you to Nathan and Dustin. I got to sit in on one of Dustin's sessions. So thank you, Nathan and Dustin, for inviting me. It was absolutely amazing. It was powerful. So thanks again for the work that you're doing. And thank you, Nathan, for being just a huge part of why equity work is moving forward in your town. I think it's huge and powerful work. So I really appreciate both of your times. So we're on schedule. I appreciate you talking a little bit longer. I felt like a stage conductor behind the scenes being like, take more time. So thank you for doing that. And now that we have everybody back on screen, I think what we can do is we can jump into some Q&A questions. I know some of them are coming in through the chat. I know some of them have been sent to me via email. So what we'll do is we'll have everyone unmute, which I know is like the scariest Zoom sentence you could ever say, but I feel like I know all of you, we can handle it and be unmuted. And if I have any direct questions for anyone, I'll make that known, but I think this is pretty open-ended, so just feel free to jump in and answer these questions. And I'll just jump into the first one, which this came up a couple of times, and I feel Falmouth may have touched on it, so Portland, South Portland, feel free to jump in, but the question was, how can we ensure that this work on race and equity and inclusion is happening in the public schools? And is the work that you're doing in Falmouth, South Portland, and Portland, is that overlapping with the school systems that are in your district? And anyone feel free to jump in.
I will jump in, and I think, well, actually, Pius, let me just turn it to you because you're much more knowledgeable about what's going on in Portland schools.
For my daytime job, I work with a program called, or I co-run a program, or I run a program called Portland Empowered. It's based on Maskey School. We work with the school district. Even before I say that, I think the school district is doing amazing work. We have the multilingual and multicultural department at Portland Public Schools, and they look at things through the racial and language and many other issues that makes students and families to be or to feel welcome in the school district. And the school board and the superintendent are working to look at what type of classes do we have to bring forward that will represent the voice of the students and their families so that they feel they belong, they are part of this education system. For my daytime job, I work with a program called Portland Empowered. We have a student group, and then we have a parent group, which we call parents and students. What we do is we work with Portland Public School Board and teachers in the classrooms to look at some of these things through the lens of the parents that we work with and make suggestions. But that is not the only thing that is needed. A lot of other programs in Portland do that. I would just suggest that if you are watching us and you live in a different town, make sure that your city or your school district does establish an office that will look into this and work with the school leadership to make the change happen.
And I'll just say two things. One, in my job at the Community Foundation, we've looked at the model that Portland Public Schools is using because it is a standout in terms of the depth that they're going into around approaching racial equity. They're building on the foundation that Dustin offered us, but going really deep. And we've been excited to talk with them and see if we can explore ways that other school districts might learn from them. And then I'll just say, as a parent, when my son was at Lyman Middle School, they did really fabulous work looking at disparities in grades and disciplinary actions. And then he's now at Portland High, and I tell him all the time, this is probably the one and only time in your life where you'll be surrounded by so many BIPOC people and have this kind of experience of being in a big organization that is so attentive to your needs. Not that they don't have issues, but they're really digging in hard to address it. It makes me happy where, you know, when he's not in school, I worry about his safety as a BIPOC kid, but in school, I feel like even if something happened, they would hear me and they'd be responsive.
I can speak for a few minutes, but actually I wonder if Decca wants to because she works for the state.
Yes, thank you so much, Margaret. I think it is extremely important to talk about DEI when it comes to schools, because we know the school to prison pipeline. We all lived in, we all have kids who are in the public schools, and if we're not involved in our children's education, it's going to be really difficult for our brown and Black children. I work in my daytime at the Department of Education. So way from when George Floyd was murdered, we put out a statement and said we condemned, as the Department of Education, racism. And we did not stay there, but we did that call of action behind it and created a DEI committee that really meets every week and every month. The subcommittees meet every other week, but we have a meeting for the DEI committee that meets every month. So after that, what happened was there was also a joint statement of commitment and support for diversity, equity, and inclusion with the Department of Education, many school boards of association, many school superintendents association, main administrators of services for children with disabilities. So we did that also, that big joint statement. And to talk about a little bit about this as the Black and brown people, and we live in this every single day, whether it is our work that we do 50 plus hours a week, whether it is for those of us who are city councilors or work in a public or private sector, or even if you are a member of your leadership in your community. For example, I am part of the Somali Community Center of Maine. We talk about diversity, inclusion, and equity every single time that we meet. I'm also part of the Maine Muslim community, and we talk about that. So we live and breathe in DEI. Unlike some of our peers who just say, okay, my job is asking me to do this training, I do the training and that's that. It is not for us. We really live and breathe in this. And it's extremely important for us to really highlight that and make sure that our brothers and sisters who are who are white to really feel that way in order for us to move forward, all of us, and once and for all, you know, end racism, which is really rooted in our society and in our systems. And those systems, people talk about sometimes systems are broken. No, systems were built like that. And it is really giving us so much barriers to not move those hurdles. I want to shout out to Pedro Vazquez, who is in the audience. He has a huge contribution when it comes to the Human Rights Commission. He really puts so much time and effort. And what makes a difference for our Human Rights Commission is it is in our ordinance. And it stays there, and it's something that is going to be continuous down the road. It's not something that we'll just look into right now and ends. And it's the first one in Maine municipality to have. We do have a Maine Human Rights Commission for the state level, but this is the first in municipal level. So I want to give him a shout out to that. And he is an extraordinary human being and amazing, and can move mountains when it comes to rights of all human beings. And one of the things that we look into, and Nathan touched base on that a little bit in his city, we really also want Black and Indigenous people and Brown and all minorities, LGBTQ communities to feel safe and say, I can open a business in the city of South Portland, right? So we're giving them that space to really make sure that they are welcome in the city of South Portland. And Dustin, what you're doing is amazing. I'm really, when you decide to run for office, let me know. I'll be in your kitchen cabinet.
Yes.
Thank you all. I want to jump
If I could, Tori,
oh yeah,
to
absolutely.
Falmouth, the question about what's going on in the school department. Actually, the Falmouth School Department is considerably ahead of where the municipal side of our government was. They've got, I believe, a couple of committees, staff, student committees, DEI subjects, obviously. And I know it's been in their community dialogue. And I believe a significant number of staff, like I want to say 20 or 30 have attended the groundwater training at REI, which I also attended with a couple of staff and counselors from Falmouth earlier this summer. So yeah, we're catching up to them, I guess I should say, in Falmouth. Yep.
Perfect, thank you. And I have another question I want to jump into for all of you, which is any suggestions for separating politics from equity work? I live in Cumberland, North Yarmouth, and it seems that some vocal people want to make this entirely about politics of right and left. It has left our community leaders hesitant to have the conversations. So any tips for separating politics from equity work? I know that Dustin, you had talked about being nonpartisan, GPCOG is nonpartisan. So how can we make sure that we are keeping it separate, but also being intentional about the work that we want to do?
Yeah, I'll say when I go into a lot of my teaching, what I'm trying to do is encourage people to be critical of both sides. That's where it starts. If you can humbly be critical of both your own side and the opposing side. I mean, it's easy to point fingers at someone else, but can you be critical of where we are missing a step? So for me, I'm critical of, okay, where did the Obama administration, where did the Clinton administration go wrong? We're about to talk about the crime bill. We're about to talk about the 90s. Those were times where a certain politics was in power. But we can go back and talk about another side as well, the Reagan administration, Nixon administration, right? Let's be honest about where we found our faults and where we went astray. And then once we're okay with being humble about saying, okay, we've got our own parts to play, we all take a responsibility for that. How do we move forward and accept that there are solutions on both sides? And I think that's where I'm hoping to get to in the third session. But what I've told folks is, let's be critical of each side. Each side has a part to play. So if we individually take responsibility and stop making it about blaming the other as part of what's going on, I think that's one way I've tried to keep it balanced, that I'm not, only supporting one side and not the other. There's both places where we need to do better. That's why right now is a time for a call for unity and healing. Because there's such division, we got to cut a lot of that divisiveness out. And I recognize that there is chatter because I'm in the papers, I'm watching the news. I think there's just this such emboldened stronghold on an idea or staying in a position and being afraid to kind of enter into someone else's side. I'm not afraid to enter into another side and hear, where people are coming from. That's where we've got to be. Can you cross that boundary and say, okay, I know I've got my ideologies, but I'm willing to hear that there could be a better solution on the other side. So that's what I'm hoping that we can continue to do, and be humble enough to own the responsibility that we all have. So that's what I've tried to do. I don't know if others have found better methods.
I'll share. So there's so many thoughts going through my mind, but one of the most important ones, I think, was from a colleague that I worked with at USM. His name is Dr. Leroy Rowe. He teaches a class on mass incarceration at USM, and we also served on the it's a long acronym, but IDAC, Intercultural Diversity Advisory Council, I think is the title. And I learned so much from him in the work that he did with students in the classroom. And working in higher education, we have to be bipartisan. We really have to make sure that we're supporting students at all levels. However, in my work as a DEI officer, this is my work, but this is also my life. So I was criticized recently on social media for bringing up politics on LinkedIn specifically, and saying, this is supposed to be a professional space. Why are you talking about politics? Why are you talking about diversity? Why are you talking about protests? I'm doing a session later on protests and riots and humanity, and really just talking about this holistically, because like Councillor Delac said, we live and breathe this work. We can't separate this work. It's not like I can wake up in the morning and not think about my skin color, or not think about my sexuality, or not thinking about my race. This is the work that I do. And so, obviously I have my own bias. I'm not going to say that I don't, but I do try to understand where people are at. I really do try to understand and listen. I'm not perfect. I do try to listen and understand both sides, but it's hard. It's hard when you see so much injustice going on in the world and you want to help and you want to be supportive. And I just have to remind myself that, like Dustin said, that, we have to understand both sides of the aisle. We have to understand both sides of the issue so that we can unify and make the world a better place.
Jump in real quick. So this specific question about, I think, community leaders hesitant to have the conversations. That's a tough one, because they're basing that because of the critics that are speaking, right? And so it feels uncomfortable to do that. But they still are the gatekeepers, right? And I would say you at least have to unlock the door. Maybe the town council or the board of selectmen in a smaller town don't necessarily have to be the place to have the conversation, but open the door to the conversation, enable and encourage the local library, allow for the conversation to happen. And I would add that, if you don't do that, then you're missing out, because I know, Dustin, you said, you got two sides sometimes here, but there's a boatload of people in the middle that need to have the conversation in order to be enlightened and engaged. I just think there's just a huge amount of opportunity to continue to have the conversation. And I just hope community leaders just, don't block the conversation because of there might be critics.
Kyles.
Right. So I was going to add to a couple of things. One is that, yes, we have to hear each side, but I think each side have dug deep into their heels. How do you identify those who are in, and this is a question for anybody to answer, how do you identify who is in the middle? And also, I'm all going to say something that Dustin may have already said about how tokenizing. Once we city leadership, business leadership foundations. I think I've seen a couple of people who are leading businesses in Portland and across the state, or foundations. You don't just hire one person of color and then think that you are done. You need to build support up around them. There's something that I say to the young people that I work with is that you don't just give BIPOC or marginalized people a seat at the table. You have to make sure that you have given them the tools that they need to be successful. just hiring me and throwing me into an office which do not look like me and expecting me to do the work that we all have to do because I'm the only person that checked the box for you, doesn't work. And municipal leaders, this is a very difficult conversation to have. And if I am 60 years or 35 years, and all I have known and heard from the media is one narrative, and then asking me to change that narrative overnight, it's not possible because there's emotions attached, there is deep-rooted beliefs involved. So we both have to have patience with each other. And I have sat into some of these conversations and heard people say, well, I don't know what to do. And I've heard people on the other side say, well, I'm not going to help you get to where you need to get. We need to figure out how to talk to each other. I think that is the only way that we will move forward. Is it going to be easy? No, I don't think it's going to be easy. It is difficult work. So I really appreciate everyone who is doing this thing every day. We need to work. We need to work on it.
Tori, can I just jump in here? This idea of systemic racism, and going back to what Dustin said about the importance of understanding history. If you understand the history of the United States, if you understand the history of racism going back into the 1400s, it's systemic. It means that it's part of our institutions and we all are participating in it. We're victimized by it as BIPOC people, but it's a system that engages everybody in it. And so there's no good guys and bad guys. And I think once we start falling into that trap of thinking about, you know, the people who do racist stuff are bad guys or they're conservative, we're missing how deeply entrenched this is in our culture. And then on to this issue of tokenism and the difficulty of hiring people of color. I think one of the things that we really need to do is really question what it means to be qualified. You get tokens because there are people who have the right kind of white pedigree to fit in as a BIPOC person to organizations, but we rarely think about, you know, taking the kind of really cool cultural assessment that we did years ago in the SATs and looking critically at it in terms of our hiring practices. Do you require a college degree that is certified in the United States? Do you ask people about felonies and convictions? What kinds of stories do you tell yourself about what a person really needs to do to be able to be qualified to be in this position? You have got to interrogate your processes because there are lots and lots of people who could and would do a job really well, but they're not going to get through those kinds of deeply entrenched racist structures. I knew you'd agree with me, Decca.
You know, I love you, Leila. One thing that I want to add to that is when Nathan, you were talking about how to get a qualified, employees. I think it depends on how you advertise as well. I mean, if you are really reaching out to a certain group of people, only that certain group of people will see your advertisement. But you have to be broad on that. You have to reach out to other communities and say, hey, this is a job opening that I have. Can you advertise in your network? That way, other folks will be really interested in that, and that will bring diversity in your city. I love Mallory Hobson, who is an investment person, and she's amazing. And she talks about her organization, how they really want diversity to come to their organization and really make it better. And in her company, diversity will make things better, if you will. And if you want to have diverse members in your city, you have to advertise in a different networks.
Thank you all. It looks like we have about 5 minutes left, so I'm going to do a two-part question. One question and a comment. So I know we want to talk about a call to action. And I know Nathan and Dustin, you talked about that a bit, but I think it would be great for us to kind of reiterate, because the biggest thing that we don't want to do, especially in this work of equity, is to say, here's a book to read, here's a podcast to listen to, here's something to do, and then not giving them any tools to actually take action and be intentional in their communities, at work, in their social circles. So I want to make sure that we are giving people on this webinar, and really everyone, actual steps to take to say, okay, I want to be more equitable. I want to be more inclusive, especially in a place like Maine, where we have a lot of people that are saying, you know, what equity problem? We don't even have any diversity here. So how can we possibly have an issue? Because I know that those come up as well. So I would like to go to each of you and ask what your call to action would be from your municipality and from you personally. And I also want to add, who is a leader other than Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. that you look up to? That was a question that came in as well, and I would love to hear from all of you. So I'll go ahead and start with Margaret.
I can go first. So my call to action is to get involved in local politics. There's so many ways that you can get involved, from joining a committee to presenting a workshop to just helping out at your local soup kitchen or anything. Really just get involved in your community. There are so many ways and so many opportunities, especially in South Portland. So people that I look up to, there's a lot of people that I look up to. I have about 6 people on my list. Today, I'm going to say Angela Davis. And so she's pretty much a badass revolutionary, author, teacher. She knows so much, and an academic, and inspires me to keep going with my education, because I will be done this year, please, Lord Jesus, with my dissertation. So that's it.
Great, thank you. I'll go to Dustin.
So for, I believe if we're specifically talking about Falmouth, I think our call to action for any towns, cities that are looking to do this, understand Black history to help understand how your review of your policies, practices, procedures can then improve and affect change for Black and Brown individuals. On a greater scale, and the 3 pillars that I've used for Falmouth: learn, think, act. Let me tell you, you got to listen to the voices of those who've been marginalized, allow them to be the leaders in this. You need to learn about that history, learn and then understand. So you're thinking, internalizing, empathize, personalize this, and then act. And one of the tools I say, speak up, speak out, right? You should feel empowered. If you have the first 2, if you've learned, if you've personalized, now you should be able to speak up and speak out. So for me, that's a call to action. That can be for anybody in any space, but specifically for towns and organizations. Begin to start reviewing Black history so that you can help work your way to review what you're doing in your own municipalities and towns, and how you're improving the lives of Black and Brown individuals. Lots of leaders and folks that I look up to. For me today, like Margaret was saying, today, you know, with my list, I'm gonna go with Brother Malcolm X. And I love Malcolm X because of his passion and his power. And sometimes I feel like the vilified brother, right? For being angry, that for some reason that makes me a bad person, but his anger was true, it was genuine. And if you really understand who he wasn't angry. He was a calm brother. He just was calling for an end to the things that he saw. So today, I'm kind of a Malcolm X feel. I'm ready and passionate to go.
Thank you, Dustin. Nathan, anything to add?
Yeah. So I've never been a person that really had a list of influential people that, you know, I would say I look up to as a leader. You know, perhaps that's part of me being white and being different here and not having as much passion in life. So sticking to today, who would I look up to? You know, it really gets localized for me. I really have got a lot more fulfillment out of my job, learning about this and working with local leaders. And those 2 would be Tori and Dustin. I appreciate everything you've done and the leadership that you have. And Dustin, you know, we have a really trusting relationship. And for me to hear, you know, I kind of thought Malcolm X was up there for you. And you know, now I got to have more conversations with you, because, you know, what little I know, that's scary for me, right? But you'll be able to help me with that. And I look forward to having those conversations.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Nathan. We will go to Lilia and Pius.
I guess my call to action is to take it to the micro level. I think about how you can reach out in your own networks. where are the people, the BIPOC people in your life? Are you engaging with them at all? Who are the people around you? Are you making eye contact with people and giving them that nod to say, like, it's okay, I appreciate you're here? Can you engage in conversations and stretch a little bit with the people that are around you? You don't have to go to city council meetings, although we want you to. You don't have to run for office. You can do micro level change. And you know, I was thinking when you first asked the question about who you look up to, I was going to be like, well, today I feel Audre Lorde, but my new hero right now is Austin Channing Brown. I just finished reading I'm Still Here, and I have never felt, or haven't felt, as validated about my experiences as a BIPOC woman since reading Bell Hooks in the 80s. Like, it's really a tremendous book. And so she's my idol.
Thank you. I have that on my nightstand. That's up next in my reading rotation. I'm
It's a
excited.
quick read. You're going to feel really like, somebody knows my story.
Yeah.
And then it's going to reveal some real, if you're like me, some intense rage. I've been like, whew, scab your jaw.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to
And it's
that.
all true.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Piles.
I will take notice of that. Lilia, you know, I always learn from you. So for me, why don't I start with saying that I will repeat something that I've already said. Once you hire a person of color, make sure that you build support around them. That is how you make change, and be open to their suggestions, because as we've said earlier, they have a lived history. And also, don't be too hard on yourself, because we didn't get here overnight. Where we are now was built up from the beginning, and it has 400 years. It is like there's a race and you get someone to start ahead for like 10 minutes, and then you say to someone, can you follow them? We're not going to change overnight, as difficult or as easy as it may be. So we need to be kind and nice to each other in the process. It's a nasty job talking about race or poverty or everything. Let's try as much as we can to use our emotions to get interest. But when we are engaging people that we want to come to our side or to see things the way we see, let's get the emotions out of the way. I know it is not easy. It's very difficult to do, but it's possible. And also, each and every one of us have a sphere of influence. Within that sphere of influence, I kind of like shaded it like you have green, and then you have orange, and you have red. The green is the guy or the friend, the lady friend that you can call and say, hey, can we go have coffee? And they will not ask you, what are we going to discuss? They'll just go have coffee with you. Those ones are not the difficult ones to have this conversation with. The ones in the orange will say, what do you want to talk about? And then you tell them, and then you convince them, and then they will show up. The ones in the red are the ones that say, I know what you always talk about. I don't want to talk to you. Those are the ones that actually we need to spend more time. We all have those people in our sphere of influence. Those are the ones that we need to spend a little bit time, be nice to. For us, those of us who are trying to do this work and trying to bring them into the fold, for them to see this as an issue of humanity, not politics, we need to also work and build on our patience, get our emotions, because we tend to say, those who are working on this tend to say that, why don't you understand? This is easy. No, it's not. As I've said, it's been built up several hundreds of years. So let's be easy on them. Let's find a way, whether it is race or any other thing that we are facing in this country, let's find a way to have a humane conversation. And I am going to go more than one in terms of the individuals that I kind of like, I will not say I keep exploring and I keep learning. Being an African immigrant coming to this country is like re-educating myself. But along that line, I think apart from Dr. King, I can say Malcolm X, and I can say Stokely Carmichael. I think these two gentlemen have what I call righteous anger, which sometimes I find myself in that sphere, being angry, but I believe that it's a righteous anger. It's not an anger that I'm going to go out and beat someone up. I'm not that strong. It's an anger that I want to talk to someone and tell them that what is happening is not okay. Ella Baker is somewhere out there. And then locally here, Jerry, Tim Wilson, and then the young people who are leading the Black Power movement here in Portland. Each and every one of you is my hero. I look up to you. I think when you get to a certain, not that I'm that old, right? When you get up to a certain level, a certain time, you don't want to go out and be marching every day. And these young people have energy. They have they engage elected officials. They engage city leaders. They say it as they feel. I want each of them to know that each of them, they may not agree with me, but each of them are my he and sheroes. And we appreciate what they would do. We are here to support them in whichever way that we can.
Decca hasn't gone yet.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna circle to Decca. I know we're a little bit over time, but Decca, I want to make sure that we hear from you before you wrap it up.
Oh, thank you so much. Wow, call to action is always for me to uplift the diversity of each city that we occupy. From Atlanta, where I lived, where we had a lot of immigrant people who did not speak English, and uplifting them and empowering them, and coming to Maine, started in Lewiston, and then South Portland. That has been always my call to action for folks to be a part of everywhere, people who look like us, who might sometimes think that because of all of these layers that we have, we might not be able to break barriers, but yes, we can. And I can be an example of that. Pius can be an example of that. And many, many other folks who come after us are example of that. I really enjoyed this question because it was raised by my colleague, Councilwoman Jocelyn Litton of South Portland. And besides my mom and dad, my parents, who are totally different people, my father, extremely well-educated man, traveled all over the world, speaks so many languages, may God rest his soul. And my mom, who never been to school, cannot read or write, even in her own language, but the wisdom in that woman, who is now still lived here with us, but went back to Somalia, is something that I cherish every single day. Telling me, a young woman who was born and raised in a country that was not seeing women as equal to men, but telling me every single day, you are the queen of this house. You are our queen. You are, once you have that queen thing on your head from your parents, you think nothing can stop you. So that can help me, to break a lot of barriers and go to school and get 2 master's degrees, have a leadership in our communities, all of those powerful things. And I put that into my children, telling my boys they are the kings in this house. And my daughter, I always telling her, you are the princess. Nobody can do anything to you. And I am so, so grateful that they are such an amazing humans who can contribute to the world. For other leaders that I look up to, and one that always comes back to my head and never leaves me, is Nelson Mandela. And in this particular space, we're talking about love. We're talking about empathy. We're talking about, bringing communities together. I mean, he did that, all of that, in jail, in prison, in oppression. He learned his oppressors' languages to communicate with them and say, we can have a better life together than, dividing ourselves. And I look at what happened in the Capitol last Wednesday, a week ago, and looking at those men's faces, there was no love at all. There was nothing but hate, each and every one of those folks' faces. And I looked and I said, how did we come to that? How did we come to such hate in our lives when we can have so much love and change things into a better place for all of us? It does not matter what color your skin is. It does not matter what your sexuality is. It does not matter if you speak other languages. So I think it's extremely important for us to call that unity and love and empathy to move forward as humans. And I think Dustin mentioned that racism is not politics. We take that always to politics, but it's a human right. It's human, it's an opportunity for us to bring that back, that humanity to it. And who can do that better than us, right? So that is the title of this Zoom that we're in today. If not us, then who?
Thank you, Decca. I think that that was the absolute perfect note to end on. So thank you so much. I know we went a little bit over time, but I really am just extremely appreciative. So I do want to take a minute to thank all of you, not only for taking time to talk with me today and to talk with everyone, but really just for all of the work that you're doing and that you continue to do in your communities. I think it's important. I think it's extremely necessary, but I also know that it's really hard and it's really exhausting. And so I really commend each of you for taking that time and for doing your part to really make this region a better place. You know, I love Maine. I'm a local Mainer. Dustin, you're an Aroostook County boy. I'm a Cumberland County girl. I've grown up here. And so, you know, I think it's really important to have these types of committees to make sure we're doing our part to be inclusive. So thank you again. Also a huge thanks to Maine Initiatives, to the NAACP of Maine, to the MLK Steering Committee, to the sponsors for being here and for bringing this work to life. And thanks to all of you for spending your morning with us as part of the MLK celebration. I really hope that you found it inspiring and helpful. I know that I did, and I know there are a ton of other sessions happening today until I believe 6 o'clock. So please, you know, utilize all of these sessions, join as many as you can, listen and learn, and just thank you all again for being here. And I'm wishing you all a really, really happy, powerful, and informative Martin Luther King Jr. Day. So huge thanks
Tori,
to all of you.
Thank you for organizing this. It is just such a wonderful gift on this day. Thank you so much. You did a great job.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for
Thank
being here. Thanks. Have a great day.
Bye.
Take care.